Orbital Strikes. Orbital Strikes are the simplest way to get extra firepower from your super destroyer. Our dedicated bridge crews are responsible for coordinating these strikes, so let's give them a round of applause. Yes, very good. Keep clapping. Today, we're going to be ranking every single orbital strike in Helldivers 2. To keep things simple, we'll be ranking them in the order that they appear in the ship management menu. But keep in mind that these are just my opinions, and if you disagree, you can make your own tier list using the template I made on tiermaker.com, the link to which will be in the description. And with that out of the way, let's get on to the rankings. First up, we have the Orbital Gatling Barrage, a barrage of high explosive rounds fired from the destroyer's high-speed rotary autocannons. The Orbital Gatling Barrage is a decent pick for an orbital. It penetrates heavy armor and covers a decently sized area. It lasts for around 10 seconds, making it a decent choice for holding choke points against a horde of enemies. The cooldown is great too, only being 70 seconds by default. It's very basic, but that's not a bad thing at all, because it can be used in almost any situation. It's good against all factions, and can be used on any difficulty, so it's just a solid pick overall. I think I'm gonna put the Gatling Barrage in, like, A tier. It's useful in almost any scenario, because it's just good at killing things. And yeah, it has a short cooldown. It has what you want. Next up is the Orbital Airburst Strike, a projectile which explodes while airborne, creating a deadly rain of shrapnel, not effective against heavy armor. The Airburst, in my opinion, is unfortunately not as good as the Gatling. It's lacking in many areas when you compare the two. Both cover an area for a similar amount of time, but the Airburst comes down in intervals, one bomb after another, instead of a steady stream of explosives like the Gatling. It doesn't penetrate heavy armor, which is a huge problem for an orbital strike in my opinion, and it even has a longer cooldown than the Gatling to boot. It's a shame, but I don't think the Airburst is very good. It could use a buff. Maybe give it a larger radius and better damage, then it could be used to clear an area of weaker enemies while keeping structures intact for cover. That's how I would buff it personally, because I think that it would be cool to have an orbital that could wipe an area out of enemies and still keep structures intact, you know, for cover, of course. I'm gonna put the Airburst right now in C tier. I just don't like it that much. Don't think it's that good. Next up is the Orbital 120mm HE Barrage, a precision artillery salvo over a small area, perfect for taking out concentrated enemy units. The 120mm is a very underrated stratagem, and I think that's because it's just a smaller number than the 380, but I think it's a more practical choice for a lot of situations. It covers a decently sized area, a pretty big area in fact, and is capable of destroying all kinds of structures. It lasts for around 15 seconds by default, which is more than enough to destroy any heavily fortified outpost on the bot front. It's not as bombastic or overkill as the 380, but I would consider that to be a strength and not a weakness. It's much more controlled, it's much more precise, and it's better for not killing your teammates. Consider taking this if you're looking for a nice controlled method of destroying outposts. So I'm going to put this in A tier. I'm actually tempted to put it in S tier. I think it's actually one of the best orbitals in the game. Screw it. I'll put it there for now. Next up, we have the Orbital 380mm HE Barrage, a prolonged barrage, wreaking extended destruction over a large area. Communication with teammates is advised. So the 380mm is the bigger, dumber sibling to the 120mm. It lasts longer, covers a larger area, and has much bigger explosives than the 120. But like I said earlier, I find it to be overkill in many situations. It's the best at destroying heavily fortified outposts, but it lasts a bit too long, and the radius can cause a lot of friendly fire incidents. The bombs will just go everywhere, and you'll end up with a lot of dead teammates if they're anywhere near the area. But I do have to admit that the 380mm is very, very fun. So if you're just looking for the biggest explosions possible, then this should definitely be a part of your loadout. I'm putting the 380 in A tier, maybe above the Gatling, but in my mind they're interchangeable for which one's better. Next up is the Orbital Walking Barrage, a linear artillery barrage which moves at intervals, driving the enemy out from cover while allowing an advance. The Walking Barrage is my favorite out of all the barrage-type orbital strikes, and that's mostly because my favorite faction to fight is the bots. The description describes it well. It's essentially a 380mm barrage that progressively moves in whatever direction you threw it. This makes it an incredible tool for pushing into enemy bases. It allows you to make a slow push into enemy territory and mop up any stragglers that escape the explosives. The only real downside is that I wouldn't consider it effective against every faction. It's best against bots, because it pushes into a territory and drives the enemy out. It's decent against Illuminate, for the same reasons, but I wouldn't say it's very good against the bugs, because the bugs are just gonna come right up to you anyway. They'll flank you or escape the explosives. So I would consider this also, it's one of my favorites, so I'm gonna put it in like top of A tier probably. I'll put the 380 right before that. Next up, we have the Orbital Laser. The destroyer's laser cannon will sweep over the designated area, vaporizing all targets within the effective radius. The Orbital Laser is one of the most powerful and destructive stratagems in the game. It's capable of destroying any enemy, and destroying nearly any structure in the game. After it's deployed, it will seek and destroy any enemies and structures, focusing on high-priority targets first. It is incredible for simply tossing away at an enemy base, as it will wreak havoc over the entire area, instantly destroying any structures and quickly killing any enemies in the vicinity, and leaving a trail of fire that can cut off and kill any remaining enemy forces. The only drawbacks are the extremely long cooldown, which is 5 minutes by default, and the limited usage, as you can only use it 3 times in a single mission. Regardless of that, I still think it's an incredible choice to take against any faction on any difficulty. It's unrivaled in its destructive power, so I'm putting this in S tier. It's not for everyone. If you're in and out of a mission quickly, the usage won't matter that much, and the 5-minute cooldown, it does hurt, but it kind of balances this thing out. It does insane damage, and like I said, instantly destroys buildings and can kill basically any enemy in the game. Next up is the Orbital Napalm Barrage. Launches a prolonged barrage of napalm shells over a wide area, setting a swath of land ablaze in mere moments. The Napalm Barrage is one of the best options for area denial. By default, it calls in 5 salvos of 5 bombs each, with a generous radius and spread. You can use it to deny flanks, defend extraction, or just destroy a nearby area. Not only will it kill enemies during the barrage, of course, but it will also leave flames behind for a short while afterwards, once again, making it incredible at area denial. There's not much else to be said about it, apart from the fact that it's just awesome and really damn fun to use. I would strongly recommend it for bug missions because they're the most likely to walk into the flames, or I guess Voteless would also do the same thing. This is another A tier in my opinion. A lot of A tiers, but we're gonna start to get into some worse orbitals now, trust me. Next up, we have the Orbital Rail Cannon Strike, a high-velocity rail cannon round fired at the largest target in close proximity to the beacon. Targeting is automatic. The Rail Cannon Strike is definitely one of the easiest ways to kill large enemies. It will kill everything in one shot except for factory striders, but this of course comes with some drawbacks. The automatic targeting can be really messy with stratagems like this. They either go for the largest target, or go for the most insignificant enemy on the other side of the map for no reason. The cooldown is pretty long for an Orbital Strike too, sitting at 3.5 minutes by default. I would take this one more often if the targeting was more reliable, but for now, it's just alright. So I'm putting this in B tier. If the targeting was better, I'll put it in probably A tier, but it messes up too often and the cooldown isn't that great either. Next up is the Orbital Precision Strike, a single precise shot from the destroyer's Atlas cannon. The Precision Strike is loved by many, but unfortunately, I'm not in that group. I don't like using it. I just find it inconvenient to use in combat. It's too precise. Frankly, I have trouble landing it most of the time if I'm in the middle of a fight. I would rather bring an Eagle 500 kilogram bomb in most situations, mostly because of the explosive radius. If the Precision Strike had a larger radius, then I would like it a lot more. It does have some things to like about it, of course. It does massive damage against every enemy in the game, and it has a short cooldown, only 90 seconds by default. If you're good with it, then I'm happy for you, but personally, I just don't like it. And for me, I'm gonna put it in C tier. I think it's alright, I just don't like it, but if you're good with it though, it's pretty damn good. I'll admit that. I just don't like it though. Next up, we have the Orbital Gas Strike, a projectile which releases a cloud of corrosive gas. harmful to both organic and robotic life forms. The Orbital Gas Strike is another great pick for area denial. The damage it can deal to a group of enemies is pretty insane, and that's not to mention the crowd control effects. The footage here speaks for itself. The kill counts you can get are insane with a gas strike. The ability to damage and confuse enemies all at the same time is pretty great. The radius is perfect too. It's large enough to cover an area, but not too large as to damage your allies. I've also been told that it can destroy structures, but I haven't tested that myself. It's pretty solid against all the factions and on all difficulties, because gas can penetrate just about every armor in the game. I'm also putting this one in A tier, like a pretty high A tier, in fact. There we go. It's really damn good. Next up, we have the Orbital EMS Strike, a compliance weapon to modify enemy behavior. The projectile stuns all targets within the strike radius. The EMS Strike is frankly a waste of a stratagem slot. It's not even the best crowd control based orbital strike. That's the gas strike. The EMS is outclassed by pretty much every other stun and crowd control in the game. EMS mortars and stun grenades are much more efficient ways to stun enemies, and there's also gas, which will cause enemies to attack each other. So I'm not really sure what the purpose of this orbital is. The EMS strike is just way too situational to be useful for an entire mission, and that's why you don't see anyone using it. If you're looking for an orbital that can apply CC to enemies, just take the gas strike instead, or even the napalm barrage will stop enemies from advancing on you. So yeah, Orbital EMS Strike is D tier. I think it's pretty bad. Pretty bad. And finally, we have the Orbital Smoke Strike. Creates a large, thick smoke screen to block targets' line of sight. The Smoke Strike is unfortunately just not good. There are better orbital strikes, and there are better ways to use smoke. Dedicating a stratagem slot to smoke is already a bit iffy, and making that an orbital makes it worse because of the delivery time for orbital strikes. You need to open the stratagem menu, input the code, throw the stratagem ball, and then wait for the orbital strike to come down. So in that case, the Eagle Smoke Strike is downright better for delivery time, and smoke grenades are just better and easier to use. Even when compared to the other crowd control orbital strikes, the gas strike, which confuses enemies and penetrates all armor, has a shorter cooldown. The EMS strike has a shorter cooldown. This one just isn't in a good spot, and I'm not sure how you could buff it. I mean, just reduce the cooldown for one. It's ridiculous that this is longer than the gas strike. It's not like a useless stratagem, but it's just completely outclassed in every metric. There's no reason to take this when there are better ways to accomplish what it can do. So I'm going to put this also in D tier. Over the EMS strike, I think this is more useful than the EMS strike because you can use it to infiltrate a bot outpost. But again, why wouldn't you just bring a smoke grenade or anything else like that? So yeah, here we are. We're on to the final rankings now. One thing I will change is the Gatling Barrage can come down to B tier. I think I blew my load there a bit too early. That shouldn't be an A tier, but it doesn't stack up against the Walking Barrage or the 380 or the Gas Strike in my opinion. It's pretty damn good, but it's not that good. But apart from that, I think I stand by these 100%. This is my list. This is where I'm going to put them. So yeah, that's about it for the rankings. If you've watched all the way to the end, then please leave a like on this video and subscribe for more videos on Helldivers 2 and other games coming soon. Go ahead and leave a comment about your favorite orbital strikes. Tell me about how the EMS strike is secretly good. I'm joking around, but I do actually welcome the discussion around different playstyles, different preferences. I think it's really interesting actually to see. It's been a little while since my last upload, and I'm sorry about that if anyone actually cares. I was honestly pretty burnt out near the end of January when I was making like a video every 4 days or so, but I'm gonna shift gears and try and just upload once every weekend. Maybe more than that if I'm feeling up to it, but I don't want to upload bad videos. I'll also be making some Helldivers videos that are not tier lists, believe it or not, so subscribe and stay tuned for those. And yeah, that's all I have for today, so this is the SES Prophet of Dawn signing off.